Let's take you to the West African nation of Senegal and tell you about international rights group. Amnesty International is calling for an independent probe into violence that led to the deaths of protesters. Government sources say 16 people died, but the organization says the number could be higher. The call for a probe follows the government's announcement that it will launch judicial inquiries into the disturbances. The violence was triggered by the 2-year prison sentence handed to opposition leader Ousmane Sonko for corrupting the youth. Joining us is Osman Diallo, Executive Director for Senegal's Amnesty International. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Perhaps let's start with laying the foundation, and you can tell us about the political landscape in Senegal. What is that like?
Thank you very much. My title is Senior Researcher for Francophone West Africa, including Senegal, at the Amnesty office in Dakar. And getting back to your question about the situation, it's a bit tense right now, a week after the protests that erupted in Dakar and Ziguinchor following the conviction of Ousmane Sonko. There are protests that were planned today and that have been prohibited by the authorities, so the prefectural authorities in Ziguinchor and Dakar. Since the protest, which according to our estimates, according to our tally, has led to the death of at least 23 persons between Dakar and Ziguinchor, the opposition, including the political party PASTEF, of which Ousmane Sonko is the leader, has called for a campaign of resistance and for the resignation of President Macky Sall. 2 days ago, during the cabinet meeting, President Macky Sall announced an investigation into the killings and the destruction of private property and public property that occurred during the protest. At Amnesty International, we welcome this decision to open investigations, but more importantly, we call for an independent probe that will be open to civil society, to political actors, and that will come to its conclusions, in which Senegalese people will know for sure who were the responsible for the violence that occurred during the days of 1st and 2nd of June. And also, when those people have been identified, they could be tried by a court of law according to fair trial standards. Because if you remember, in March 2021, there were similar protests at the beginning of this affair when Ousmane Sonko was arrested. As part of the investigation, at least 14 people died during that protest, and a probe was announced by the government. But 2 years after that announcement, no civil parties, no victims, not any of their relatives have been auditioned by the judiciary. And we don't want a repeat of this scenario again.
And that's just it. In trying to understand the political landscape of the country, you want an independent probe that will also include players like civil society. And so what is the space like? Are civil society groups free to do their job? How much freedom do they enjoy in the country?
Civil society groups are free to do their jobs, along with the press, along with most of the protesters, but what is the problem in Senegal is that charges have often been leveled against civil society groups, journalists and citizens based on their opinions. So we have charges of offense to the head of state, for which many people have been detained arbitrarily. We have also charges such as contempt of court or contempt against public institutions when people criticize the workings of the judiciary or even the workings of the security and defense forces. And those have been used to clamp down on civil society organizations, associations, but also journalists. Right now, I think we have at least 3 journalists that have been detained on charges such as contempt of court or offense to the head of state. And among the opposition, there have been a series of arrests since December of last year that have, we would excuse the word, decapitated the leadership of the political party PASTEF, amongst others.
What is it that has made Ousmane resonate with young people in the country? Why have they responded to his call so loudly?
I think there are many factors that have led to the popularity of Ousmane Sonko over the last years. The fact that he's often seen by his supporters as the last man standing in the opposition, plays an important role in his popularity and the willingness to go and take the streets and defend him. If you recall, former minister and son of the former president, Karim Wade, was convicted for graft and embezzlement in 2015, and based on this conviction, he was excluded from political participation during the presidential elections of 2019. The same charges, the same conviction were also leveled against Khalifa Sall, the former mayor of Dakar and member of the Socialist Party. And based on this conviction, he was also excluded from political participation. So if you look at the opposition, Ousmane Sonko is the last one that has a chance against Macky Sall in February 2024, and the resistance that has been seen in Dakar and the willingness to defend him taps partly into this fear that the opposition is being completely sidelined and that the ruling power is quote-unquote selecting those that can participate in political elections using trumped up political charges. And more importantly, there is a very important lack of credit or even of the independence of the judiciary has been criticized. The judiciary has been criticized for being under the thumb of the ruling party, and that's why we have often this kind of violent protests and riots following convictions or during investigations or summonings by the court of Ousmane Sonko in Dakar.
What has been the regional response? ECOWAS is known to be on top of situations that have the potential to flare up even more than what they currently are. And so has there been anything on the side of regional and even, I guess, neighbors to Senegal?
Yes, there have been a reaction since 5 days now from regional organizations and neighboring countries. I think ECOWAS made a statement on during the weekend denouncing the violence that have left 16 people dead according to the Dance government's tally of Saturday, and also criticizing the destruction of private property. The African Union has also made a declaration condemning the violence in Senegal, and even the African Court for Human and People's Rights have made a very strong statement about the respect of human rights in Senegal, the protection of civil liberties, and calling for restraint both the government and the opposition. Among the neighboring countries, I think Gambia has made a very strong statement condemning the violence in Senegal and calling for a dialogue that will lead to a peaceful resolution of the political crisis. But just to conclude on this point, I think the events in Senegal have a very strong resonance in the neighboring countries and in the West Africa region, because the ECOWAS has played for a long time a political role in supporting democracy and challenging let's say military takeovers. And if you look at the ECOWAS region, over the last 2 years, there have been 3 military takeovers in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and in Guinea, where the military takeover was justified by the new powers in town on President Alpha Conde's successful bid for a third term. And even when ECOWAS engages these neighboring countries about the resumption of power to civilian authorities, one criticism that has been leveled by these neighboring countries is that ECOWAS often intervenes at the end of the conflict and doesn't address the symptoms that have led to these military takeovers. And among those symptoms has been political manipulation and constitutional changes.
Very quickly for us, what is the situation as we speak this hour?
So the situation is quiet but tense right now. There is a calm in Dakar and in Ziguinchor. Yesterday in Ziguinchor there were protests following an incident where the police tear gassed the convoy that was going to the cemetery to accompany one of the youth that have been killed during the protest. But the calm has returned. So there have been announcement of protest tomorrow, and we will see how they will unfold.
All right. Thank you very much, Ousmane Diallo. He's a senior researcher with Amnesty International, joining us from Dakar in Senegal.